in facilitating community groups to do good in their neighbourhoods. So since 2018, we have been empowering ordinary people to create community change. So where I come into that is I joined Joe at the beginning of this year, and my background is actually in design. I worked in interior design initially, and then from there I moved into visual merchandising, which is basically creating creative displays within the retail space. And so that was all before I had children. And I did some really fun, amazing stuff in that space where I was building huge retail designs in, on Market Street in the city. And it was probably the most fun time, of those years of my life. However, after I had children, it really wasn't the right space for me to return to. I really wasn't comfortable with that heavily consumer-driven space, and also the wastefulness that you see when you work in retail. So I was sort of gravitated towards working with community groups and to using that creative skill and also qualifications in marketing and communications to help community groups to build their online presence and sort of connect what was happening on the ground with community groups with the sort of emerging social media scene. This was 10 years ago now. And the first group I worked with was a group out in Windsor who were trying to preserve a heritage precinct, and they were doing fantastic work. They had people in the organisation who were very skilled, who knew all about the heritage, they knew about the political side of things, but what they didn't know is how to get that information out to a broader audience. And so because I was in my early 20s at that time, I was best placed for no other reason than being 20-something to jump on and help them with their social media. And I realised it was a really good outlet for creativity and for communication, and for using positive, kind communication and also creative communication to sell a message to a new audience. So following on from that, as you heard, I worked with Good for Good, I worked with the Reconnect Project, which are both organisations that really align with me in terms of working within the circular economy and within that reuse space. So what I'm going to talk about tonight, if it's okay, is really why you choose to do the good things you do, and then how you communicate the work that you're doing, whether it's online or face-to-face, because there are commonalities between both of those spaces. So you can see here I've got a quote from Ronnie Khan that speaks to how people are inspired by your why, by why you choose to do what you do. And we really love Ronnie. We had Ronnie on a call this week on Friday to talk about her work with Oz Harvest. And so what we've done is we've put together, in the same way that Permaculture has your 12 guiding principles, we've got our 5 guiding principles at Good for the Hood that guide everything we do. But specifically what I'll talk about tonight is how we communicate why we do what we do. So you see from what we've said here that if you know why you exist, and if you're driven by a purpose, then you're well equipped to keep working towards your goals. It gives you a really clear sense of where your organisation is going, and also how to talk about where your organisation is going. So I'm sure a lot of you are aware of Simon Sinek. Simon Sinek talks about the golden circle, the circle of why, and how organisations who place their why at the centre of their operation tend to be more successful, because people tend to be more comfortable with connecting with you on the basis of your why rather than your what. Sorry, I'm just going to reorganise my screen so I can see my notes a little bit better. Sorry. So when we talk about your why, I'm so sorry. All your faces are blocking my carefully written notes. Yeah, that's better. So when we talk about our why, if you think about it like mowing the lawn, you might say you might be mowing the lawn simply to have shorter grass, but of course that's not why you mow the lawn. You mow the lawn because you might be having your neighbours come around for a barbecue. It might make it more inviting for your kids to play on, in the same way that you got involved with permaculture, not simply because you like digging in the dirt or planting plants, that there is a much deeper reason why you connect with the permaculture community. And so therein lies your why. And so when you keep that vision in the foremost of your mind when you're building a community, it helps people to connect more deeply with what you might be doing. So, you know, if you look at some of the groups that we work with, we've worked alongside of, and you look at the way that they sell their vision to their community, they don't necessarily talk about what they're doing. They're talking about why. Why is that the thing that inspires them to do the work that they're doing? And so a really good example is the Parramatta River Catchment Group. And you may have heard of them. Kelly Darley is a local to Parramatta who's really passionate about waste in the Parramatta area and in Parramatta River. And she could simply say, well, we don't want rubbish in the river, but that's not going to bring people on side and bring on board alliances from the community. So they say Sydney deserves a world-class river. Oz Harvest, they say we're building a world with zero food waste and free of hunger, rather than simply saying, well, we're taking food, we're feeding people. Clean Up Australia, to empower communities to reduce the environmental impact of waste. All of these organisations, you can see they have a really clear idea of what large-scale change they're working towards, but also what their vision is and how that vision unifies their allies along the way. So when we look at what Good for the Hood's 5 tenets are, and I won't go into these in any great depth, but we talk about being collaborative. We talk about how we build our alliances and connections with our communities, the importance of bringing a multitude of voices on board into your organisation, and the role of shared ownership in solutions. We talk about being positive, and that's really one of our key messages, is that positivity and maintaining a positive tone and a positive voice in everything that you do is a key driver to bringing people on board with your mission. If you focus on having a can-do approach, people are much more likely to feel empowered and inspired to be a part of what the good that you're trying to create in your community. Being resourceful, recognising the embodied values of the skills within your community already. Being inclusive is obviously really important, and recognising that, you know, people from diverse communities can help and bring different skill sets into your organisation, and being generative. So how do we translate those principles into an engaged community online and off? And so the first one that I mentioned there was to be collaborative, and I've written there because everybody has a teaspoon, and I'm kind of curious if anyone on the call, you might have to raise your hand, recognises why I might be referring to a teaspoon in terms of collaboration in a community group. As I mentioned previously, we welcomed Ronnie Khan onto a call earlier this week, and seemed like a lovely opportunity.
In the event,
that seemed like a lovely opportunity to share one of Joe and myself's favourite quotes from Ronnie that really demonstrates where we draw that idea around collaboration from. So I'm going to play this video, and just wave your hands if you can't hear it.
Of a huge conflagration, like an enormous fire. We as human beings each have 3 principal options as to how we behave. Number 1, we can look at that fire and run away as fast as we can and leave those that cannot run to burn. Number 2, we can write an angry letter to the newspaper demanding that those who started the fire be punished, or we could start a demonstration. In the event of a huge conflagration, like an enormous fire, we as human beings each have 3 principal options as to how we behave. Number 1, we can look at that fire and run away as fast as we can and leave those that cannot run to burn. Number 2, we can write an angry letter to the newspaper demanding that those who started the fire be punished, or we could start a demonstration. Or number 3, we can run and find a bucket. And if we cannot find a bucket, we can find a jug. And if we cannot find a jug, we can find a teaspoon. And I know that a teaspoon is tiny and this fire is huge, but we all have access to a teaspoon. And if we, each and every one of us, use our teaspoon, we will put out that fire.
Right, so that was just a short clip, and Joe specifically asked Ronnie to share that story on our webinar this week, being that it's one of her favourite stories that Ronnie told, and it was really a reason why Jo got into the space that she's in. It forms part of her inspiration for starting Good for the Hood. And so we talk about building alliances with other organisations that might have a similar goal to yours, or building alliances with other people who have a similar goal to yours. And you know, we firmly believe that the best way to work as a community group, as a charity, as an organisation, where you're trying to do good in your community, is to build alliances with people with a similar passion to yours. And both of us, having worked in this space for quite a long time, are really aware of the fact that you quite often see people who might work in the change-making space who will come across organisations with a similar goal and see them potentially as competition, whereas if you come across someone who's working towards the same thing as you, you know, it's so important to connect with that person and to share skills and to share knowledge and see if there's an opportunity for collaboration and to work together. And where we translate that into the online space, of course, is sharing knowledge online, is sharing the stories of other organisations online, and so on.
In the event of
And so we talk about nurturing connections and building relationships with other organisations. And so again, these are things that translate into my space, which is more the online space, but of course have relevance to working generally as well. And so, you know, sending updates to other groups who you might be working towards a similar goal, be it litter reduction, be it within the circular economy. You know, talking about opportunities that you might have encountered, opportunities you're working towards or might be relevant to other groups, sending you congratulations when you see that another organisation has achieved something amazing that they've been working towards. Asking questions, there's a wealth of knowledge out there to be shared amongst different community groups, and you know, I think quite often we're afraid to approach other groups and really mine for that information that might be available out there. But it's a really great way to build an alliance and also to build your own knowledge and your own skills, and then to give something back to other community groups who might be working in a similar space to yours. It's a beautiful thing to share with each other and to give back to each other. And then, of course, post-lockdown, to take it offline and to meet up with other groups working alongside you towards wherever you may be working. The second tenet that you heard me mention earlier is positivity. Not just what you're saying, but also how you're saying it. And Jo's background before she became involved in this space was as an occupational therapist, and you know, around leading behavioural change. And it is one thing that she and I are both incredibly passionate about and have both encountered in our own ways, in our own spaces, is that people are not motivated by fear or negativity, but where you can lead people with solutions, what they can do and how they can do it. People are much more likely to be engaged with the message that you are selling them. And specifically, success stories. We talk a lot about storytelling in the social media space and how powerful storytelling and success stories can be to motivate people and to help people to focus on what is being done and also what can be done. And the online space lends itself so beautifully to sharing stories from within your organisation, to share stories of the members of your organisation, what you've achieved, how you've achieved it. It also allows you to use a variety of content. Of course, I've just heard you talking about video content, which is an amazing way to get your message out, and as well as written stories, testimonials, talking about who your members are and what they've been doing in this space. And so when we talk about positivity, we're not just talking about what you've done and how you've done it, but also the language that you use when you're speaking. So you can see an example there is, if you were to speak in the negative, you'd say, don't put plastic bags in the yellow bin. What we say is that that's not a motivating way of speaking. That's not a way to build behavioural change. What we talk about is, what can you do? How can you do it? And so if you could think to yourself about would you reframe that if you were trying to change people's behaviour and encourage people not to put their plastic bags in the bin, what is the sort of language that you use to motivate people into behavioural change? And it's not about scaring people and talking about the detrimental impacts. It's about talking about solutions to problems. The second part of storytelling that we really talk about is putting a face to a name. So what I found in 10, 12 years of social media, of producing social media and online content for community groups and charities, is that the thing that resonates most strongly with your audience is always going to be who you are, who the people are in your organisation. And a big part of that, I think, is about identifying with an organisation and understanding who the people are behind it and what their motivations are for being in an organisation, because you're much likely to connect on a personal level with a group, be it a charity or a sustainability group, if you can see the people behind it, which makes it easier to connect with it. So when we talk about storytelling, we talk about making meanings for people. So the reason that we talk about telling the story of your organisation is because it helps to create connections between different parts of your brain. So, sorry, I'm just going to skip ahead here. So I've included here, and I hope you don't mind, is a video that's a real favourite of ours, and we've used this a lot to really demonstrate where we believe storytelling sits within the space of telling the story of a community group, but also getting back to that tenet of positivity and why positivity is such an important part of telling an organisation's story. Oh, of course, it's not going to work. So sorry. Sorry, everybody, just bear with me for 1 second. If I can't pull it up, we'll skip over that. I won't hold you up for too long, but it is a lovely one to show if I can quickly bring it up for you. Can everyone still see what I'm doing? Can you wave if you can still see what's happening on my screen?
We're still seeing the slides. If you want, I can try and open that video up and share it if that's going to be easier.
If that, oh, look, I can bring it up. Hang on.
Got it?
So sorry.
With MailChimp's marketing smarts, you're gonna.
Okay, I imagine you can hear that.
We're still seeing the
just,
view.
Yep, just bear with me.
You might need to unshare your screen and then reshare it.
You reshare it. Yep, I'm just in the process of doing that. Just give me 1 second. All right. All right. How am I going?
Yes.
Yeah, beautiful.
You are a good person. You spend time with your family. You work out at the gym.
Come on, push.
You conserve water while showering. You like nice clothes. You give to charity. You recycle. You drive a Prius, but you use your bike when you can. You enjoy the occasional distraction at work, and you always send a card on Mother's Day. Always. But there's a part of you that tells yourself that you're not so good, that you could be doing more, that the world is falling apart at the seams, and all you've been doing is yoga. One day, you see that the rainforest is being destroyed at a staggering rate of 32 million acres a year. That's the equivalent of 1 football field every 78 seconds. You feel bad, angry, guilty. You've been apathetic for too long. You want to do something about it. You must do something about it. Well, this is what you're not going to do.
I quit.
You're not going to quit your job, leave your family, get on the next flight to Nicaragua, take a bus to the edge of the jungle, then hoof it across rivers, lakes, and streams on a quest to the very heart of the rainforest.
Take me to the heart of the rainforest.
You're getting closer. You're almost there. You have arrived.
You're not going to ingratiate yourself with a local tribesman, go to great lengths to earn their respect and trust.
No.
It is around now you realize you're living out the cliche gringo fantasy of becoming an honorary native and leading the resistant forces. But screw it. If they could do it, so can you.
I'm gonna save you! This guy comes over here, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna pull a zap thing, bats right through him, right over here.
You're not going to coordinate and occupy the rainforest movement, realize it's hopeless, summon the power of the gods, lead a revolution against the deforesters and their multinational employers in an apocalyptic once-and-for-all battle to save humanity, to awaken 2 days later in an El Salvadorian hospital with 2 toes missing on your left foot.
Siri, I want to go home.
Hobble out of Central America, up through Mexico, across the Sierra Madre where you break down, have your first cigarette in 4 years, accidentally start a wildfire, killing off the endangered species that once served as your occupational distraction, finally make it back home, only to find you've been replaced at work by a guy named TJ, and that things at home are not what they used to be. You're not going to do any of these things, but what you can do is follow the frog. Buying Rainforest Alliance certified products ensures the future of our rainforests, so that you don't have to do the things you shouldn't do anyway. Just follow the frog.
Okay. I hope that was all right for everyone to watch that. It's one of my favourites, and we do a much longer presentation specifically about using storytelling to share your organisation's story, and we always include that one because it's a bit of a favourite of Joe's and myself, and I could talk about it at length, but I won't subject you to that. Simply to say that there's a few ideas in that video that really resonate with us around positivity and sharing a message about what you can do. I mean, as much as there are scenes that talk about the reason why you might be concerned about the rainforest, the overriding message of that video, of course, is that there are simple actions that we can take every day to make positive change in the world. And it does it through a use of humour, and that's another factor that we really focus on in storytelling, is how can you share your message, but how can you do it in a way that's humorous, because humour, of course, makes you so much more relatable. It makes it so much more engaging. It makes for such engaging content as well. The next thing we talk about is resourcefulness. So when we talk about resourcefulness, we're talking about what assets do you have at your disposal, and you might think about that in a number of ways, but when we talk about that specifically about building an online presence for yourself, the way I look at it is, who do you have in your organisation that can play a part in building your online presence? And so from my point of view, when I got involved with the guys out in Hawkesbury, they were very serious-minded people who were very focused on an issue that was around infrastructure, appropriate infrastructure for the group. And I found people in that organisation who had fantastic knowledge around heritage, they had fantastic knowledge around political functionings, they had fantastic knowledge of waterways and flooding, of course, being the Hawkesbury, and factors like that. And so when I was building their online presence, I had this amazing set of resources that I was able to build on. I had people who were incredible storytellers who knew the story of the Hawkesbury, story around the heritage of the Hawkesbury and stories of locals around the Hawkesbury. And I had people who were incredible artists that were able to create amazing creative content. So as much as I was the social media facilitator, I was able to look at these different resources and see how was I able to draw them all in to create what was a very effective social media campaign. Next, the fourth out of our fifth tenets that we talk about is inclusivity. And you can see there that quote that we love: diversity is being invited to the party, inclusion is being asked to dance. And just like when you might be organising an event in the real world, when you're looking at your online presence for your organisation, we look at how can you make your online presence as inclusive as possible for people. And so in the last 18 months, obviously all of us have had to shift significantly with our operations and really embrace the online space much more. And we've learnt an awful lot in that time. Good for the Hood, Joe has, I have, Good for the Hood has. And what we really find is that just like in the real world, people do really want to be a part of what's happening. People want to share their story. People want to get involved in organisations, in charities. Same with the Generous and the Grateful Reconnect project, who I've also worked with. People really want to be a part of it, but we need to look at, as an organisation, how do we facilitate that? How do we help people to be a part of what we're doing? And so when we look at sharing our message online, there are factors about the online space that really help, and also that really hinder our ability to share our story. The digital divide. Having worked with the Reconnect project, I'm really aware of the digital divide that still exists and is more important than ever now, with people working from home, with students working from home. Also working on, facilitating groups online. People are more able maybe to hide in an online space, but also we've found that we were able to have a much broader reach by working online. So from the point of view of inclusivity, the last 18 months and this time as well, what we're seeing is that we're running online workshops, we're running webinars, we're running council webinars, and we're able to connect with groups in different states, in regional areas. We've had people specifically reach out and say that they would never have had an opportunity to attend an event like the one they've been able to attend had it not been specifically an online event. And so next month we are hosting an artist, Jeff McCann, and Jeff works with upcycled, reused items. He's an inclusive artist, and he'll be speaking on our free webinar next month. But as part of him getting involved with with this webinar, what he's asked is that we include live transcription on the event, so that the event is more inclusive, so that it's open to people who might be hearing impaired. And that's a really good example of one thing that we are striving to do, to be more inclusive, and we know we've got more to do, but there are those opportunities when you're working online for how you can become more inclusive. We're also looking at including an inclusivity plug on our website, so that will obviously have an effect on the size of the font and so on, for people who struggle with that. And the final one of our 5 tenets that we work around is being generative. And being generative really ties in nicely with the Permaculture Principle 12, to creatively use and respond to change. And I think that is something that's really relevant to all of us now. How do we, Ronnie Khan talks about she didn't pivot, she pirouetted when COVID-19 hit. How, as an organisation, do you look at the current situation that we face, and how can you embrace it, and how can you find ways to work within these constraints that COVID-19 has put around all of us? And a really good example of that I've been watching recently is the Love Your Waterways Sydney campaign, and this is the Sydney Living Rivers guys as well that I was talking about previously, who are passionate about river cleanup projects. Kelly Darley runs waste removal days along the river for people to go and pick up waste, but of course at the moment we can't have groups getting together and doing something like that. So instead they've started this Love Your Waterway Sydney, and it's a social media campaign where people are able to carry out one of these 5 actions that are the 5 actions that they recommend for keeping the river clean: disposing of litter, picking up pet waste, washing your car wisely, keeping dirt away from stormwater drains, and making sure that the drains are only for rainwater. But they've asked that their followers share photos online with the hashtag Love Your Waterway Sydney, and you can see how that becomes a really powerful tool to share that message with a broader community. It's a really good example of pivoting under the conditions of COVID-19. It demonstrates that you're still able to do good, and you're able to share your good, even though we can't get together in groups at the moment. It's utilising, again, that online space to generate good in the community. So where does that leave us as Good for the Hood as an organisation? Obviously, we'd love to still be going out to council groups, to school groups, and speaking face-to-face. I don't know about you, I'm sure it's very obvious that I'm much more comfortable face-to-face than I am presenting online. But for now, we accept that we are where we are, and we see it as an opportunity to work with the skills that we have online to continue to help community groups making change for good. And so we have our council workshops and our school workshops that were designed to be conducted in person, but that we've made adaptable to the online space. And this allows us to reach regional areas. As I've said previously, we're working with council groups in Victoria, we're working with schools in regional areas and interstate in the next few months on facilitating workshops around waste reduction, around sustainability, as I said previously, around storytelling and so on. And as a natural offshoot of that, we've actually, in the last few months, been working on building our own social network online, hosted by Mighty Networks, where people can join our network and we can host all of the information that we've got. We can allow people to collaborate, we can allow people to work together, we can bring together people from community groups across Australia. And it's been a very natural response to having worked online for the last 18 months predominantly, and seeing the need out there to bring different community groups together and to share resources and to share knowledge. So that's where we are taking our learnings from COVID, from working online into the future. So I'm going to wrap it up there, but open the floor to any questions. I probably raced through that a little bit. So if you had any questions about online, about social media, about anything to do with the digital space and how you can best utilise it for your organisation or to do good, I'd love to take that. Otherwise, I look forward to hearing what else you guys have got to talk about.
Don't forget to unmute yourself before you ask questions. I'd love to hear about, I guess, a few more examples of some of the groups that you work with and maybe some things that you've overcome to help them, or problems that they've overcome or you've overcome for them.
Yeah, no, I'd love to. You would have heard me previously talk about when I worked out in Windsor. I doubt anybody would be aware of the campaign that I'm referring to, but it was quite a big major campaign for that area where there was a piece of very inappropriate infrastructure proposed for the area that the residents were really disappointed about. What they were fighting for was a better solution for the area that didn't see a part of the town being decimated by a major arterial road being put through it. And that's where I keep referencing that the group was made up of people who were heritage advocates and were heritage advocates who might be very scientific and so on, but weren't so comfortable with the online space. And inevitably it became quite a political campaign because it was a project that was being proposed by the government at that time. And the group became subject to a lot of, you call it trolling, a lot of negative attention online, and it really helped me to really form my own beliefs around the power of really positive communication when you're working in an online space. You know, the power of being constantly, consistently respectful of everybody that you deal with, and you see it in the climate change space as well. You know, where you might witness a debate that happens online around climate change or around any of these really big issues that are facing us, where you can be consistently respectful, where you can approach it with kindness, approach it with respect for the other person's position, I believe you're much more likely to change hearts and minds. And that was what we saw in Windsor, was that, you know, when you lower yourself to say, well, you're saying that because you belong to this political group, or you're saying that because, you know, rather than coming at the crux of what somebody's is talking about, you're much less likely to bring people on board. And at the end of the day, if you're in the change-making space, the goal of what you're doing is to change the mind, you know, is to bring people on board. If you believe passionately in what you're doing, then you should always have the goal of bringing other people on that journey with you. And the most powerful way of doing that is to be positive and to be kind and to be respectful of everybody around you. So your question was what I've learned, and I think that's probably been a really big learn for me, is to be respectful. And there are really good examples of that you see online. It's something that I spend a lot of time looking at. You know, you might talk about, I spend a lot of time learning about cults or, you know, organisation, you know, groups like that, where people have been brought out of those groups, and the way that people have been brought out is not through deriding that they've managed to get themselves, you know, into this set of beliefs, but actually by being really respectful of the beliefs, but also showing kindness and showing a willingness to talk through where people are at and how can we help you? How can we help you to come on, you know, on board with what we're telling you? I hope that answers your question. I feel like I went off on my own my own passions there. I think there was a question in the chat that popped up then. All right. Yeah, so we are on Facebook, we're on Instagram, but the network that I referenced right at the end there is a new thing that we're building, and it's called Mighty Networks, and it's basically where we're building almost like our own version of Facebook, where we'll be able to host educational resources, our videos, all of the content that we're producing along the way will all be hosted in one place. And the reason that we've done that, of course, is Facebook has demonstrated that it's not the perfect platform for any of us. You know, for any of you that might have a page for your organisation, you'll have seen that your engagement's dropped. You'll have seen that it's getting harder and harder to reach people. And also there's a lot of noise on Facebook to have to cut through to get your own message through. So we've gone straight to the source and just built our own network that people can join, where, you know, people can connect without all of those other messages around it. And we're going to, it's still a work in progress, and I'm happy to send the link through to anyone that's interested. But yeah, it'll be, yes, anyone can join, individuals or organisations, and we've already got a lot of really great organisations that have joined up. We're once a month we hold a free networking call for any organisations that are interested to discuss different issues that might be facing different organisations. And so a lot of the people that have been joining those calls, we've got people that are in the reuse space around reusing plastic, tech reuse, a few other people like that that are already there. And it's about a place to be able to hold conversations, connect with each other, share ideas, troubleshoot ideas that each of us might be having. We'll be sharing information about, you know, grants that might be coming up or different opportunities like that as well. So if you don't mind, I'll just drop the link in there. Did anyone else have any questions while I'm just grabbing the link? All right, I'll just get this for you. And it's, you know, it's a really good, interesting thing to look at to see what opportunities there are that exist online if we kind of accept that we are all going to be working online more and more, irrespective of how long lockdown goes for. There you go.
Anna, oops, sorry, I just dropped my timing. I've been doing some of the admin for this Inevitable Garden Trail, and I think some of what you said is particularly relevant for what we do and how we proceed into the, well, I could say second year, but second event. So yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
Oh, well, if there's anything that I haven't covered well, or you've got any more questions, I'm always interested and happy to hear from people who might be, yeah, struggling with something online. All right, I might hand it back to you.
All right, thank you very much, Anna. And yeah, it's been good to hear about the work that you do, and also, I guess, sort of give us some ideas of how we can grow community beyond, like in PSN, but also in our local area groups and stuff like that. So yeah, thank you very much. All right.